Welcome everyone to Ein Sof Learning. I hope everyone's having an amazing day. We have had a series or multiple series on this channel before where we were about to begin learning Talmud Eser Sefirot. Now, I haven't been consistent with it, so I'm going to try again. We're going to start from the beginning of the teaching of the 10 Sefirot, the 10 dimensions. First of all, before we even start, I want to just add this idea that it might be foreign to some people, that Kabbalah is Jewish mysticism, which means that it's the deeper levels of learning the Torah. The Torah has 4 levels of understanding: simple, hinting, metaphor, and secret. Kabbalah, true Kabbalah, is the secret level. But for our level, which we don't have access to those deep secrets which are called Sod HaTorah, we attempt to understand according to our capacity. So for us, it's going to be like secrets. But compared to the people who wrote the wisdom, they didn't invent the wisdom, but they wrote these books which they brought down the wisdom from a higher world, because that's what a Kabbalah book is. That's what a Kabbalist is. A Kabbalist is a person who draws down the light of wisdom, or Chokhmah, from upper worlds and brings it down to the lower worlds, which is where we live. We live in the lowest world called Olam Asiyah. Or, if you want to be more specific, we're in the bottom of Olam Asiyah, because every world has internal and external. So everything we relate to in the physical world is the external level of Asiyah, which is where we live. That's called Olam Hazeh, this world. However, there are other levels of consciousness, meaning what we call Olamot. An Olam is a certain level of consciousness, as we're going to see. But it's also a concealment of the light of God, as we will see soon. But let's just start with reading the first sentence by the Ari, which starts like this: Da, ki terem shene'etzalo hane'etzalim, ve'nivra'u hanivraim, haya or elyon pashut, memila kol hametziyut, ve'lo haya shum makom panui, bivchinat avir rekani, ve'chalal. Ela haya hakol, memula min or ein sof pashut hahu, ve'lo haya lo bechinat rosh, ולא בחינת סוף. אלא הכל היה אור אחד, פשוט שווה בהשוואה אחד, והוא הנקרא אור אין סוף. Even if you know Hebrew, it would be very hard to follow on with what we just said, so let's break it down. He says, you should know that before the emanations were emanated, and the creations were created, there was an upper simple light that had filled the entire reality. I want to just pause here and take appreciation of the words that he uses. This is the Ari here. We're talking about the tree of life. We haven't gotten into the commentary by Rav Ashlag yet. These are coming from the words of Rabbi Chaim Vital, who wrote it down, but it's sourced in the Ari's writings, in the Ari's teachings, So he starts with saying, you should know. The word know in Hebrew is da. Da is a sefirah. It's da'at. Da'at represents the knowledge of God. Whenever a person knows something, that means they're experiencing it. That's according to the definition of knowledge, according to Kabbalah. There's different epistemological ideas of what knowledge is. But according to Kabbalah, knowledge is experience, or it's gained through experience. That means that the extent to which I'm experiencing something is how well I know it. That's why in the Torah it says, Adam knew Eve. What does it mean, Adam knew Eve? It means that he loved her in an intimate way. He connected to her in a very deep way. So he really got to know her. Knowledge is connection. Knowledge is getting to intimately know the person. It's not just, I read a book and now I have knowledge. It's not about reading. Knowledge is gained through experience. So whenever he says you should know, it implies that the following information is able to be known. It's able to be experienced. You can know this information. Know what? That before the emanations were emanated and the creations created, let's pause here. He says before. What do you mean before? There's no time in spirituality. Here, I'll read the first sentence from the commentary and we'll see that it doesn't make any sense. He says, "Tzadikim lizkor shekol chokhmat HaKabbalah miosedet al inyanim ruchanim." You should know that the entire wisdom of Kabbalah is based on spiritual matters that don't take up any time or space. Therefore, how can the Arizal tell us that there is such an existence before the emanations and the creations. What does that even mean, before, if there is no time in spirituality? Because before implies a past, implies time. So I'm not going to answer this question at this moment of time because we're going to get into the commentary. I'm just posing the questions. Another question you can ask: what's the difference between an emanation and a creation? Because it says, before the emanations were emanated and the creations were created, there was an upper simple light that filled the entire reality. What's the difference between an emanation and a creation? This part I can answer because he doesn't go into it yet. It's saying before those things which exist within the world of creation, or Bria, and before those things which exist within the world of emanation, which is referring to Atzilut. Haya or Elyon Pashut. There was an upper simple light that filled the entire reality. What's light? What do you mean or? Or is truth, or is Torah, or is the energy which spews from the source, spews from God. There's a difference between the light of God and God. God is the source. He's unattainable. If you really want to be honest, truly what God is an undefinable essence. It's a singular essence. So we can never attain the essence. But we can, and we always are, connecting to the light according to our capacity to receive. In other words, according to our desire to receive. Because what determines your capacity to connect to the spiritual worlds? It's how much you want it. How badly do you want to be one with God? That's the extent to which you're able to hold light. That's the amount of power you're able to contain within yourself. But by the way, that goes for the good and for the bad. A person who really desires to do evil, so that determines how evil he's able to be. That determines the greatness of his evil, the level of his evil. Then there's levels of goodness. And that is determined by how much you desire to do good. So, but nevertheless, or light refers to the energy, the light of God, which comes from the essence, which he's going to explain this all. I'm just still going over the first sentence. We haven't even gone to the commentary yet. Elyon, or Elyon. What's upper? If there's no directions, because we said there's no space, there's no time. So what do you mean it's upper light? Pashut. It's simple. As opposed to what? As opposed to complex? What would that look like? What do you mean it's simple? Memila kol hametziut. It filled the entire reality. What reality? You just told me it's before the emanations and creations. What reality? And why are you using the word metziut? Why don't you use the word olam? Why don't you say that the upper simple light had filled the entire world? Instead, it says the light filled the entire reality. What's the difference between a world and a reality? Velo haya shum makom panui, and there was no vacant place. What's vacant place? Such as avir rekani v'chalal. Avir rekani means it's a empty air. What's an empty air? And what's a chalal? Chalal means void. These are two different types of lack. Instead, everything was filled with this light. No beginning or end. No start and finish. No up and down. No head or tail. It was totally simple, light, and it was equal. It was uniform. This light was not shining more here and shining less there. It was totally uniform everywhere. And this is what we call the endless light. Now that we went over the sentence which we're going to try to understand, let's try to understand it. So, bear in mind that the entire wisdom of Kabbalah is based on spiritual matters that don't take up any time or space. That's the first thing that we need to remember. The concepts we're going to refer to might sound like something we can understand, or something we relate to, and we are going to try to relate to it. But just remember, and I will keep bringing it up, but I won't bring it up all the time, so you need to remember it, that it's not anything physical. Light is not referring to the light of the sun. The concept of light is talking about a spiritual or abstract concept. And then the concept of a vessel, which we're going to talk about what a vessel is soon. We're not talking about a cup, like a physical cup, although the analogy of a cup can help us understand what we're talking about. All right, let's get into it. Ve'ein ha'adar utmura noheg bahem kol ikar. And there is no absence and change that applies in them at all fundamentally. The concept of absence and change, they don't exist. וכל השינויים הנאמרים בחוכמת הזאת, אין זאת אומרת שהבחינה הראשונה נעדרת ומקבלת צורת אחרת. And all of the changes or differences that we speak about in this wisdom does not imply that we're talking about that the original form becomes absent and acquires a new form. This is referring to the concept of change in spirituality. It's saying that whenever there's a change or a difference that takes place, the way that the thing originally was still exists. And it has now acquired a new form, as it's going to say here. Ela hashinuya amur, instead, the change that is mentioned, hu inyan tosefet hatsura labad. It is an additional form alone. Vetsura harishona ena zazeh mimkoma. And the original form does not move from its place. Just to give an analogy, let's say I have this, my glove here. It's in position number A. This is the original form. It's called a tsura, a form. Now I want to change it. I want to change this form. So I change it to point B. It's no longer in point A, but it's now in point B. That's how we understand the concept of change in this physical, illusionary world. But in spirituality, the concept of absence doesn't exist. So that means that if and again, remember, this is just an analogy. It's not describing any true spiritual reality here. But let's say this is a spiritual thing in a spiritual world. I have it here in point A, and I want to change it. Some sort of a difference needs to undergo. Now I have two forms. The glove is still in the first place, and it's now also in the second place. The concept of absence doesn't exist. That means that it's still in the original. But there's an additional form called shinui tsura, difference of form. So the concept of difference, or the concept of change, in spirituality, you can just think of it as addition. It doesn't replace the original. It's not renewing anything. It's just an additional form. It's like whenever you edit a video or a photo on your phone and you click save. It gives you two options. Save original or save as a copy. In spirituality, there's no such thing as editing the original, because the Tanakh says very clearly that God does not change. So if God does not change, that means that when He created the world, which we know, He created the world from within Himself. He created the world from Himself. So if He doesn't change, that means that He did not stop being God when He created the world. If He were to change, that means that the Creator became the creation and ceased being the Creator. But that's not the case. The Creator remains the Creator, just as He was before He created, which means that He would be just the essence. God existed before the creation. He was not something that is different or changed after He created. After He created, He remained the same, but now there's an additional form. Everything in this entire creation is a different expression of God, of the true one God. So whenever we say in the Shema Yisrael that Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, what that means is that all of these multiplicities that you see are really just expressions, different expressions of the same one unity, which we call Hashem. The light. The light doesn't have any changes. The light doesn't have any form. But it's the vessel that gives the shape to the light. It's like water. Water doesn't have any form. Water takes the shape of the vessel. So the light of God doesn't have any shape or form. But the vessel, meaning the recipient, that entity, that creation, that emanation, which receives the light, creates borders around the light from its own point of view. But those borders don't exist from the light's point of view. Because again, the light doesn't have any form. It's the vessel's perception that is what creates measures or boundaries or borders. And those borders and boundaries and limits only exist from the vessel's point of view. As far as the light is concerned, there's no vessel. But it's waiting for the vessel. The vessel is trying to receive the light so it can funnel the light in a proper direction to bring about tikkun olam. Because the same person can receive the light and cause the world to become worse. How? By holding the light captive in the klipot. Whenever a person commits a sin, he reveals light, but then that light becomes concealed afterwards. He conceals the light. Sinning conceals the light. But whenever you receive the light in a kosher way, so therefore you've revealed the light. But of course it also it depends on how selfless you were when you received it. Because the extent to which you are selfishly receiving that light, even if it's a permitted pleasure, but it's selfish. If it's selfish, meaning if you're receiving it because you're satisfying yourself, although it might be permitted with certain pleasures, like for example having wine on Shabbat, like having challah, sometimes we do mitzvot selfishly. It's permitted to do, but what happens there? You're just missing out on an opportunity to really maximize it. But not only are you missing out on it, it's actually considered a sin. Why is it a sin to engage in a permitted act selfishly? Because you could have and you should have been selfless. Because at the end of the day, Yisrael are neshamot. They are holy neshamot. And if you're not connected to the neshama, which means you're not connected to that aspect of selflessness, of altruism, of receiving for the sake of sharing, therefore you're held liable for not only missing out on the opportunity of revealing more light, but it's actually considered a sin, an averah. Because you were obligated to do it in according to your capacity, but you haven't revealed your capacity. And that's the problem, is that we're all being held captive because of our own Yetzer Hara. Our souls are being held captive. And we need to redeem ourselves from the grasp of the klipot. Klipot are those forces that they're not inherently bad. Some klipot are good. Some klipot are bad. But whichever urges or inclinations that a Jew has to engage in acts or thoughts or words that contradict the laws of the Torah, that they are going against the teachings of the Torah, then those forces that are inclining you, that are tempting you to engage in those forbidden acts are actually coming not from you, but as a consequence of the exile, being sent out into the foreign lands. Jewish people, their only inclination should be within the confines of the mitzvot. So if there are any inclinations that are to transgress the mitzvot, we know it's coming from the chutz la'aretz, from the forces of impurity that exist outside of the land of Israel, or outside of the nation of Israel. And so that means we need to detach ourselves from those forces. That was the secret of Lech Lecha. When God told Abraham, go for yourself from your land, from your birthplace, and from your father's house. What do you mean from the land? Because the land outside of Israel is impure. And it, within its own right, strengthens the Yetzer Hara of a Jew who is not a tzaddik. Second, from your birthplace. That's hinting at your parents. Your parents were not tzaddikim either. So therefore you were born of sin. You inherited the tikkun of your parents, which means that you've made mistakes. Because if you didn't make mistakes, then that means you don't have any tikkun to do. You shouldn't be born. So every person who's born is born to correct something. So that's the second thing. From your birthplace, you have to correct those inborn flaws. And third, from your father's household. That means the wicked ways of those people that raised you. Don't mimic the transgressions of your forefathers. That doesn't mean that your parents are evil and you have to run away from your home. But it's saying these are the 3 reasons that a person listens to their Yetzer Hara. It's because of the land that they live in, so the society, the culture influences them. It's because of their birthplace, which means they within them have defects that they need to correct. And that's okay, everybody has them. And 3, whenever a person mimics the ways of the wicked ways of the people that were supposed to be looking out for them, and then they start to inherit those bad habits, not because of genetics, not because of it's inborn in their soul, but because they learn it through their life. These are the 3 reasons a person is held back from receiving the holiness which they're worthy of. Specifically, we're referring to a person who has the capacity for higher connection. And that's everybody, Jews and non-Jews. So the concept of change and difference doesn't exist in the way that we understand it in the spiritual worlds. Instead, you should think of it as addition of form. That part, I think, is understood. Ki ha'adar v'ha'hashtanot hema medarchei hagashmim. Since the concept of change and absence are physical concepts. I think we understand that pretty well. V'zehu kol hakoshi lemitchilim ki tovsim hadvarim bevituyam hagashmi bigvulim shel zman umakom chiluf utmura. This is very difficult for beginners to understand because they're very used to perceiving things by means of corporeal boundaries, of limits, of space, change, and exchange. So it's very hard for us to understand. Asher ham chavarim v'hishtamshu b'hem rak lasimanim ba'alma al sharshehem ha'elyonim. And therefore, the authors of this wisdom communicate through simanim, signs, metaphors, in order to explain the upper roots. Every word in the Torah is a branch, but it has a root. The branch is the pshat. The branch is the most simplest level of understanding it. If you take the Torah literally on a physical level of understanding, of interpretation, then that's the branch. You're dealing with the branches. That's the illusion. Those are the shadows in the allegory of the cave. But whenever you receive or you reach the light, meaning that wisdom that is embedded behind the branches, which is the roots, which means you expand your consciousness and you're able to go to a upper world and understand the same words, but the way that they were truly meant to be understood. That is the roots. Those are the upper roots. So the entire language of the Torah and Kabbalah, the books of Kabbalah, were written in a language that has multiple levels of understanding. But essentially, in the deepest level, that's the secret. That's where we're trying to reach. So while we're learning this, again, we're going to understand it to our capacity. But as we progress, as we continue our journey, the concepts will reveal themselves for what they really mean, for what they're really trying to communicate. And it won't just be conceptual, it will be knowledge. Continuing. ולפיכך, אתאמץ לפרש כל מילה ומילה בצביונה הרוחני. And therefore, I will try to explain each and every word with it given its spiritual identity. That's the miracle of this book. The miracle of this book, the miracle of Rav Ashlag, was that he understood the content so well. He understood the secrets, the roots so well, that he was able to write it down in a way that it's just unbelievable. I mean, the deeper we go, if you keep up with this wisdom, this book, the series, you'll see. It's almost impossible that he could have made this book. And he did, which is a miracle. To me, it's unbelievable. I cannot believe it. ועל המעיינים מוטל לחקוק היטב מזיכרונם את פירוש המילות ההן. And therefore, it is incumbent upon the learner to engrave deeply in his memory the meaning of each and every one of these words, for it is impossible to repeat them every time. So we have to open up our ears and take notes. If you're learning with us right now, if you're still at this video at this point in time, kudos to you, first of all. The people who already left this video by this time, you should know they're not fit for the study. The people who are still here are fit for the study. That's how this works. It's all about desire. If you really want it, you're going to stay and you're going to take notes. Because this is not a book. It's not a story. This is science. We're learning science. So take out a pen. Don't be afraid. It's okay. Take out a notebook and start taking notes. And we're going to start with the first vocab term here, called terem, the concept of before. צורת הזמן הרוחני נתבאר היטב לחמן בהסתכלות פנימית בסופו בדלת ה' עוד. The concept of time in spirituality, he explains it somewhere else, but I'm going to bring it here. It's not relating to physical time like before and after. So whenever the Ari says before, it's referring to cause. And after means effect. So when it says here, before the emanations were emanated and the creations were created, it's referring to that reality which caused the emanations and which caused the creations. Which we said that there was an upper simple light that had filled the entire reality. That's what we're referring to. That was what preceded, so to speak. Not in any sort of physical concept of time, but as a sense of it was the cause. The light is the cause of the emanations and the creations. That's the meaning of before. Second vocab term. היינו האור התפשוט מעצמות הבורא יתברך ודע שכל השמות והמערים והתמרים הבאים בחוכמת הקבלה אינם חס ושלום בעצמות הבורא יתברך. We're defining here the word light. So before we said light is Torah, light is truth. But here he's going on a more scientific and technical term. He says this refers to the light which spreads from the essence of the Creator. May he be blessed. You should know that all of the names and all of the titles that appear in the wisdom of Kabbalah are not, God forbid, in the essence of the Creator. May he be blessed. Instead, it's in the light that spreads from the essence of the Creator. May he be blessed. Again, all of the names, all of the terms, like we know that there are many names of God. Yud He Vav He, Aleph Lamed He Yud Mem, Aleph He Yud He, Shin Dalet Yud, Aleph Lamed. I can go on and on. There's the 14-letter name of God. There's the 72-letter name of God. There's the 42-letter name of God. So there's many names of God. In fact, the entire Torah is the names of God. That's according to our own traditions. Everything is the name of God in the Torah. So that's only referring to the light. It's not referring to the essence. Although everything that comes from the essence is contained within the essence, we're going to learn soon that the way it's contained in the essence, it's not in the same way that it's expressed. That's what differentiates the expression from the essence. The light is the expression. The light is the way that the essence expresses itself. And that's what we relate to. Therefore, we relate to the Torah, we relate to the mitzvot, we relate to the names of God, we relate to all of these differences, all of these multiplicities. But they're really all expressions of the same one unity called God, called Ein Sof. Omnam ba'atzmut yitbarach. Instead, it's talking about, indeed, regarding the essence of the Creator, ein lanu shum milah vehege klal. There is no word that exists regarding the essence. So there are no words in the essence of the Creator. If I were to tell you right now that the name of God in the essence is, something. Any word. It's impossible. Why? Because there is no word. Why is there no word? Ki zeh haklal. Because this is the general rule. Kol ma shelo nasig, anything that we do not comprehend, lo nedahu bashem. We do not know it by name. V'zkor zot ve'al tishkel. Remember this and you will not fail. The essence of the Creator doesn't have a name. So whenever we say God is Hashem, Hashem means the name, referring to Yud He Vav He, the Tetragrammaton. That's not the essence. For many people, this is a very surprising thing to learn. What do you mean? Hashem is not the essence? That's right. Hashem is a name of God. Hashem is the name, is referring to the name of God, of which there are many names, but there's only one God. And that one God doesn't really have a name. Why? Because we have no comprehension of the essence of the Creator. And anything that we do not comprehend, we cannot give it a name. Every name that exists in the wisdom of Kabbalah implies that we know it to some degree. Because a letter is a vessel, or a name is a vessel. But there is no vessel, there is no limit to the essence of the Creator. Therefore, we cannot possibly give a name to the true infinite God. It's impossible. Number 3, we're going to now explain what do you mean that this light had filled the entire reality. V'lichora temua me'od. This is seemingly extremely confusing. Halo hamedubar kan hu beterem shenivra'u ha'olamot ve'achar kach eizo mitziyut yishna kan asher or ha'elyon tzarich lemila'oto. For here we're talking about a time before the creation of the worlds. Therefore, what reality can possibly exist here? He's posing the question that we brought up at the beginning of this video. What reality can possibly exist that this light is filling if it's before the emanations and before the creations? That's the question. V'ha'inyanhu, the thing is, ki kol ha'olamot ve'kol ha'neshamot sheyeshnam v'ha'tadim lehit ba'arot im kol mikareihem ad ha'tachlit tikunam hine hem kulam kaver klulim be'ein sof baruch hu be'kol tifartam uvchol miluam. The thing is that all of the worlds and all of the souls that exist and did exist and will exist are all included within the Ein Sof, the endless. They're all included in the endless. However, they're included in the endless in their full measure and glory. Remember, I said before, I'm going to explain this soon, or he's going to explain it soon, that everything that comes from God, by necessity, exists within Him. But the way it exists within Him is in its full measure and its full glory. Not in the way that we perceive it, which is not in its full glory and not in its full measure. The way we perceive things today is by an eye of lack. Everything that exists in this world exists within the world of correction. It needs correction. That's why we're living in the world of tikkun. And that's why the nation of Israel was sent to complete the tikkun. So, the way that everything that exists within God is not in the way that we see it today. It doesn't mean that there's starving children and that's coming from God. No. I mean, God allows it to happen. That's true. But there is no lack in God. There is no deficiency in God. There is no aspect of receiving in God. There is no way to improve God. So God is not something we can understand. It's the ultimate perfect origin, reality, source, creator, fulfillment that precedes everything, precedes the creation. The light precedes the vessel. The pleasure precedes the desire. The fulfillment precedes the desire for the fulfillment. This is a very deep concept, but that's what comes with this wisdom if you believe in God. If you believe that God exists and you believe that God created the world, that means that before the creation, everything was fulfilled. There was just fulfillment because the light is just fulfillment. However, this light was still in a state of potential. It's similar to the concept of sperm or seed or the Big Bang. They were all in a state of potential until they underwent the stages of development or evolution or expansion. And it went through an actualization process. It went from potential to actual. Look at us. We once were a seed, a sperm, in our mother's womb. And now we're fully grown. But we're not fully grown. We haven't reached our capacity yet, which is why we're still alive. Being alive means that we're growing, because life is growth. The tree of life never stops growing. That's the beauty of life, that there's no end. So as long as you're alive, you're growing, you're improving. That is the definition of life. I'm saying it so casually, but it is a very deep concept. Very deep. People ask all the time, what's the meaning of life? And here we are throwing it around, that it's growth. Anyways, we could continue, but these concepts are already very deep and taking up a lot of space in our mind. It's better to take a pause, meditate on these concepts, do not overindulge within this wisdom, because a person can really overwhelm themselves. It's foreign concepts, let's be honest with each other. It's foreign. We don't relate to the world in this way. We don't know what it means that there's no time, no space, no change. So these are things that we need to sit on. We need to really sleep on it and meditate and think about it. Ask questions about it. Pose comments in the comment section. It's a Q&A. And I'm here for any person who has any questions, any comments, any concerns, any appreciations. And I hope that you were able to gain something from this. And you have learned that Torah is not what you thought it was. No. This is Torah. Torah is not about a bunch of stories. Those stories contain this wisdom. Yes, that's right. This wisdom is concealed within the words of the Torah. As we said, that there are multiple levels of understanding the Torah. So thank you so much for listening and learning with me today. I'll see you in the next one.